Welcome back to Top 5. The night was heavy, oppressive, as if the fog itself had weight, clinging to the air like a living thing. The moon was barely a sliver, casting only the faintest glow over the decaying old house at the top of the hill. It stood like a sentinel, forgotten by time, its windows dark and lifeless. But something about it, it seemed to watch, to wait. Jake stood at the rusted iron gate, his eyes locked on the house. He didn't speak, didn't move. Behind him, Lisa and Sarah shuffled uneasily, their breaths clouding in the cold night air. "This is stupid," Sarah muttered, hugging herself against the cold. "We shouldn't be here." "We have to." Jake's voice was tight, his knuckles white as he gripped the flashlight. "People keep disappearing, Sarah. No one's ever come back to tell us why. And you think we'll figure it out by going inside?" Lisa's voice trembled, but there was an edge of defiance to it. "This place, it doesn't feel right, Jake. You feel it too, don't you?" Jake didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward and pushed the gate. The creak it let out wasn't just a sound, it was like a scream from the earth itself, as if the house resented their presence. The gate shuddered as it opened, and the path ahead, overgrown and suffocated by weeds, seemed to lead them deeper into a maw of darkness. They walked in silence. Every footstep was swallowed by the fog, but the night seemed to whisper in response, soft, almost inaudible, but unmistakable. Voices. Faint, elusive, always just out of reach. Lisa turned her head, listening. Her pulse quickened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, glancing around. "Hear what?" Jake asked, not breaking stride. Lisa paused, then shook her head. "Nothing." "Never mind." But she had heard something. A voice, maybe? Or a laugh? It was impossible to tell. The fog was playing tricks on her mind, making her doubt what was real. They reached the porch. The boards were cracked and rotting, the railing coated in thick dust. The door loomed in front of them, its wood dark and swollen, its handle tarnished. For a moment, none of them moved. Jake lifted his hand to the doorknob. His heart was racing, but he couldn't stop himself. He had to know. The knob was colder than ice, and as he turned it, the door let out a long, low groan. It opened slowly, as if reluctantly, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, the air was thick, stale. The flashlight's beam cut through the dust motes, illuminating a hallway lined with old portraits. Faces from another era stared down at them, eyes following their every movement. The walls were yellowed, peeling, and the floor creaked underfoot. "It smells like death in here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Lisa shivered. "Let's make this quick, okay? I don't like this place." Jake stepped forward, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. "We'll check the basement first. That's where the rumors started, right?" "The rumors," Lisa muttered under her breath. They didn't say anything about surviving. The hallway seemed endless as they moved deeper into the house. Every few feet, the temperature dropped. The cold wasn't just physical, it sank into their bones, into their souls, making every breath feel heavier. Shadows danced at the edges of the flashlight's beam, shapes moving just out of sight. At least, that's what it felt like. At the end of the hall, there was a door that stood out, newer, untouched by time, unlike the rest of the house. Its wood gleamed faintly, and it was painted black. Jake hesitated for a moment, then moved toward it. Behind him, Sarah grabbed Lisa's arm. "I don't want to go down there," she whispered. "I've got a bad feeling." "We're not leaving Jake alone," Lisa replied, though her own fear was evident in her eyes. She glanced back at the portraits, at the strange faces frozen in time. They seemed closer now, like they had leaned in, watching more intently. Jake twisted the knob, and the door swung open with a groaning creak. A staircase spiraled down into darkness. His flashlight barely penetrated the gloom below. "Jake," Lisa said, her voice quivering, "I don't think this is a good idea." He didn't respond. He was already heading down the stairs, each step producing an unnervingly loud echo. Lisa and Sarah exchanged a final glance, then reluctantly followed. The basement air was damp, thick with mildew, but it wasn't just the smell that made the air hard to breathe, it was the suffocating presence that seemed to press in on all sides. The darkness felt alive. It moved with them. At the bottom, the floor was stone, cold and wet, slick beneath their shoes. The flashlight flickered, its beam revealing shelves lining the walls. They were filled with glass jars, their contents hazy and distorted. Some held things that resembled human organs, others, something else entirely. "This is wrong," Sarah breathed, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jake didn't answer. He was fixated on something else, a door at the far end of the room. It was metal, thick, with heavy chains crisscrossing it. Something about it pulled him forward, a compulsion he couldn't shake. He stepped closer. "Jake, no," Lisa said, her voice low but firm. "We need to go. Now." But he was already at the door, his hands reaching for the chains. He didn't know why, but he had to open it. He had to see what was behind it. His fingers trembled as he unhooked the first lock, then the second. The chains fell with a heavy clank, each sound reverberating through the basement like the toll of a bell. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a blackness so deep it seemed to swallow the light. But from within that darkness, there was movement. A low, wet sound, like something shifting, crawling. Then, a whisper. "You woke me." Lisa let out a sharp breath, grabbing Jake's arm. "We need to go. Right now." But Jake stood frozen. The voice had come from the blackness, but it hadn't sounded like it came from a person. It was deep, guttural, and wrong. The air around them shifted, growing colder, and the sound of something dragging across the stone floor echoed from the doorway. From the blackness, two glowing eyes appeared, yellow and sickly. They were watching them. "Run," Jake whispered, his throat dry. But before they could react, the thing emerged. Massive, hunched and covered in matted fur, its face twisted and grotesque. Its claws scraped against the floor, and a rancid stench filled the room. Lisa screamed, yanking Jake backward as the creature lunged. They turned and bolted for the stairs, their footsteps echoing wildly as they scrambled upward. Behind them, the creature roared, its heavy, thunderous footsteps shaking the walls. They slammed the basement door shut, but it barely held. The creature pounded against it, the wood splintering under the force. "We can't stay here," Sarah cried, her voice on the edge of hysteria. Jake led them through the house, the walls closing in, the groaning of the floorboards growing louder with every step. The windows were black, sealed shut, and the front door was gone, replaced by more wall, as if the house itself had trapped them. "We're stuck," Lisa gasped, panic rising in her throat. "The house, it's alive." A loud crash came from behind them, and the creature's roar echoed through the house. It was coming for them, and there was nowhere left to run. The only way left was up. They bolted up the stairs, the creature's growls growing louder, more frantic. It was chasing them, and it wouldn't stop until it had them. On the second floor, the house had warped even further. The hallway twisted, windows stretched like gaping mouths, and the eyes in the portraits were gone, leaving empty sockets that seemed to watch with a deeper intensity. "Where's the attic?" Jake shouted, his voice trembling. "There." Sarah pointed at a small, crooked door at the end of the hall. They sprinted for it, throwing it open just as the floor behind them exploded, the creature ripping through the wood and plaster. Its massive, clawed hand swiped at them, missing by inches. They slammed the attic door shut and barricaded it with an old chest. The attic was cramped, filled with broken furniture and old mirrors. A single window, small and covered in grime, was their only way out. "Help me!" Lisa shouted, struggling with the window's latch. It wouldn't budge. The creature smashed against the attic door, each blow sending cracks splintering through the wood. "It's stuck!" Sarah cried, her voice high with panic. Jake grabbed the nearest heavy object he could find, a rusted old candelabra, and swung it at the window. The glass shattered, shards raining down as the cold night air rushed in. "Go, go!" Jake shouted, pushing Sarah through the opening. Lisa followed, but as Jake turned to climb through, the door finally gave way. The creature burst into the room, its yellow eyes gleaming with hunger. It let out a deep, guttural growl, advancing toward him. Jake scrambled through the window just as the creature lunged. Its claws grazed his ankle, leaving deep, burning gashes. He tumbled down the roof, crashing hard onto the ground below. The night was silent once more. The fog had thickened, swallowing the house in its grip, and the only sound was their ragged breathing. They didn't look back. But as they stumbled toward the gate, the house behind them seemed to breathe. The front door creaked open again, the house alive with shadows, as if inviting them back in. And from within the fog, a voice whispered once more. "You cannot escape." The gate slammed shut behind them.